Tonight I want to talk to you on a subject of deep concern to all Americans and to many people in all parts of the world, the war in Vietnam. Tonight, therefore, I would like to answer some of the questions that I know are on the minds of many of you listening to me. Let us all understand that the question before us is not whether some Americans are for peace and some Americans are against peace. We have faced other crises in our history, and we have become stronger by rejecting the easy way out and taking the right way in meeting our challenges. Our greatness as a nation has been our capacity to do what has to be done when we knew our course was right.
In 1967, America was already around 5 years deep into the Vietnam War. It was also the year the Doors came out with their first album. It was the year Rolling Stone began publishing. It was the year the world was introduced to the Big Mac. It was the year that Disneyland premiered the Carousel of Progress. And in the winter of '67, it was the first congregation of the Yippies. The Youth International Party was a counterculture anti-war free speech movement. It was led by Abbie Hoffman and Jerry Rubin. They staged several highly theatrical political protests, all of which came to a head at the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago. The protesters and the police clashed heavily. This resulted in police brutality and riots across the city, all of which was broadcast nationally for everyone to see. Meanwhile, in 1970, Disneyland had just relaxed its dress and hair policy on what and who was allowed in the parks. And around that same time, somewhere in late June 1970, a flyer began to circulate. It advertised a day-long international Yippie powwow, with a long list of theatrical events, starting with a Black Panther breakfast at Aunt Jemima's Pancake House, which led to a liberation of Minnie Mouse, and a Porky Pig barbecue feast. When Disneyland managers and officials got wind of the impending storm, they decided to batten down the hatches. Several meetings were held, a communications center was stationed in the back, and several emergency codes were developed. Some managers were even put undercover in separate sections, and, fearing a repeat of the '68 DNC, Disneyland called the cops. Anaheim, Orange County, and the Fullerton area's police departments were notified to wait in the wings. August 6, 1970 was the day. Around 27,400 guests were admitted to the park that day. Managers manned the turnstiles, and anyone with long hair or suspicious wardrobe was told if they want to have fun, then they were welcome. If they caused trouble, they would be asked to leave. Essentially, this was protocol for the beginning part of the day. Managers in ties coming up to anyone who looked suspicious and saying, "Be cool." Most hippies were amused or a little annoyed at this, but it sort of worked. Mostly because of the 200,000 flyers handed out, 20,000 were expected, and around 200 showed up. Of those 200, Abbie Hoffman and Jerry Rubin were not in attendance. The day went smoothly at first, even when about 30 or so Yippies climbed Captain Hook's pirate ship and hoisted themselves up too far. They didn't disturb any guests eating at the Chicken of the Sea restaurant located below. They even invaded Tom Sawyer's Island. They headed across the water and stormed the fort. They took down the American flag and hung the Viet Cong flag. They shouted, "Free Manson" and "Legalize marijuana" as they openly smoked reefer. But since Tom Sawyer's Island is in fact an island separate from the rest of Disneyland, they again failed to disturb any guest. After realizing their protest was going unnoticed, the Yippies headed to Main Street. They snake danced in the streets and paraded down the avenue with the band as they shouted, "We're marching to Cambodia," while the Mickey Mouse March played. When they arrived at the Bank of America on Main Street, they started chanting, "Give me an F, give me a U." The non-receptive crowd of around 700 tourists on Main Street began to sing, "God Bless America." A Yippie then climbed a light post and took down an American flag and tried to hang a Yippie flag. It was quickly torn down by a patriotic guest, and this quickly escalated to a shoving match. A small scuffle broke out, and Dick Nunes, the VP of Operations, announced to the crowd, "No more mass marching, no more singing. You're no longer welcome here. You need to leave the park." He was ignored just as the Yippies turned around to the castle. 150 of Anaheim's finest descended upon them. The protesters were handled as non-violently as possible. A helicopter flew over Disneyland, and an announcement came over the PA system, urging guests to please move towards the nearest exit. It took 2 hours to fully evacuate the park, and even after, they found protesters hiding until after midnight. The flower beds on Main Street were ruined. The park experienced some minor damage on the outside, and the gift shop at the Disneyland Hotel experienced some theft. All in all, the greatest damage the Yippies did to Disneyland was the morning papers. The story was picked up internationally. However, Disneyland officials were mostly praised for how they handled the incident. The park closed at 7 p.m. and was the first time operations ceased prematurely. Prior to this, Disneyland had closed one full day on November 23rd in accordance with the national mourning over the death of JFK. The next day, anyone who returned to the park from yesterday was given a refund, and anyone who seemed suspicious was asked to leave. Turns out Disneyland wasn't the place to spark the revolution, but some people just have to march to the beat of their own drum.